So we're going to start here by pulling out just a little action setup. It's the tried and tested teapot. We all know this teapot if you've ever worked on the flame before. And what we're going to do is we're just going to move around the light somewhat just so that we can kind of play around with this. So if we just jump into the schematic, and you can see that really all I've done here is create a 3D model with some sort of shading texture on it, just to give us an idea of what exactly the fragment shaders in the Matchbox Node are sort of doing to the image. So that's what's coming out of here. I'm going to set a context here, and we're going to jump down to our nodes at the bottom here. Hit M, and it'll obviously highlight all of our nodes beginning with M here. So if I just pull the Matchbox out for a second, it jumps us straight into the Matchbox directory, and in there we've got a whole number of sort of Matchbox presets that we've already loaded up with the machine. So in this case I'm just going to pick the 12 one. And what's quite nice about this is if we now attach this to the action output, what you'll see is now if we split the screens, we can have the result of the twirl over here, and over here I can have the teapot. So now we can see that as we come to the bottom here, we have the way, or the sort of controls to manipulate the fragment shader. So you can see that based on various mathematical equations and things like that, all written into a GLSL code base, we can actually start manipulating this very, very easily and very, very fast. So what we really want to do here is look at how we can make our own shaders. This is the important part of what we're going to look at today. And to do that, what we need to do is, first of all, we need to get some code. Okay, so we've had a quick look at what Matchbox does inside of the system. Where it becomes really important for us, however, is how that we can actually manipulate this node, and we can create our own shaders. Now, the way we're going to do that, unless you're very, very adept at kind of writing GLSL code, in which case, knock yourselves out. I, on the other hand, am not, and therefore what I'm going to do is I'm going to pilfer some stuff from the World Wide Web. And the way that we're going to do that is literally by jumping into a browser here. I've stuck GLSL shaders into a search engine. It could be Google, it could be any of the others. However, what it throws up is a bunch of websites, and there's stuff all over the web. There's lots of this GLSL code that people are willing to share. And the one that we're going to look at here is this quite basic sort of toon shader, but it does give you an idea of the way that the sort of colours work and how they sort of they manifest inside of the code. So what we're going to do is I've taken this and I've copied and pasted the relevant bits into a little text editor over here. Now, I've actually named this toon shader error, and there is a reason for that. It's because I want to show you what happens where if there are errors in your code, it will actually flag it inside of the system. So we're going to take this, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw up a couple of shells here, and we're just going to open these up. Now, there is a reason as to why we have two, just to make it a little bit more visual and to try and make this sort of process as simple as possible, because it can look a little bit convoluted, but I'm going to try and simplify it as much as I can. So what we do here on the left is we CD into the Matchbox directory, okay, and if I list that here, you'll see that these are all the onboard shaders. So these are the ones that came with Flame 2012. The only discrepancy here is the ones that I've got in here. So you can see I've got this toon shader error, which is the one that I've set up, and then I've got some other things in here. And you can see that each one of these versions that I've done has an associated GLSL file and an associated XML, and you'll see why as we go through. So the first thing I want to do is I want to try and compile my toon shader in here. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, if I bring out a text editor, so in this case I'm going to use KEdit, but you could use VI, you could use NEdit, it doesn't really matter. If we open this up, you'll see in here that this is the code that I've just taken from the website. Okay, it's not a hugely complex shader, but it does obviously have a number of sort of specifications in, and we'll see how they sort of manifest themselves and what that actually means. Now, what I can do here is that I now have to run this as a kind of sort of interface program, and I have to run it so that I can see if there are going to be any errors in that. And the way that we do that is by coming over here to a second shell and CDing into the bin directory. Now, if I list this, you'll see in here there's this little thing called test shader. If we just select that for the moment, and I'll put this in here, I want to test the shader that we were just looking at. So if we come to here, I'm just going to go up a level, and I'm going to go to the toon shader here with the error that I've specified, like so. And we're going to try and run this as a compile. And what it's going to do is it's going to go off, and it's going to try and compile this as a shader that Flame will be able to understand and interpret. You can see in here it goes through this compiling shaders thing, and we can see at the bottom that it has thrown up this error. Now, this error is quite obvious for those of you that understand GLSL code. It's basically saying that at line 14 there is a problem where the undefined variable is the front input to the node. So this can't be resolved. So what we need to do now is we need to go back over to here, and we need to go back into the shader itself, and we need to resolve that. Now in this particular example, what we do is we just need to specify what the input is going to be. So it's going to be an image, it's going to be a 2D image, and it's going to be, we can tell from what is being said down here how it needs to be labeled. So we're basically going to tell it that it's front text. That's the image that will be understood as the input. And if we do like so, we can now save this. And if I now close this and we come back over to here and we run the same test shader on the same GLSL code that has now been sort of manipulated, we should find that what we do get is we don't get any errors in there, but what we get is this long sort of line of XML code. Now this XML code is what now has to be taken, copied, and over here we now create an XML file that will sidecar with the Toon Shader GLSL file. So in here what I'm going to do is I'm now going to do okay edit. I'll take the Toon Shader error, and this time I'm just going to stick an XML flag on the end, and in there I can come in and I can paste all of that XML code into here, and this will now give me an associated XML that will help me now define what is going on in the interface inside of Flame. So now we're back in the Flame, and what we want to do is we now want to pull out the shader that we've just created, and we're going to have a look at it, and you'll be able to see exactly what we've done with that. So if we go into Batch and we jump in here, we're going to pull out the faithful teapot again, and on this one I'm just going to set this as a context. I'm going to pull out a Matchbox node here, and in there we're going to use, you can see here, here's my Toon Shader .glsl, and I'm going to pull out the first iteration of this, which is the one that we've just been working on. I'm going to kick it in there, and I'm also going to set a second context in here, and you'll see why in a second. If I now split the views, over here we'll have context 2, and over here we're going to have the output of action. Okay, so we can see in here, here's my my teapot. This is what it looks like. We're going into the front input on the shader, and if we go to the shader just for a second, you'll see that at the moment we have no controls over this. It's a very basic shader. It's literally just the code. All we're really defining is what is going into the front input 1 here. Now what's kind of cool about that is it gives you an idea of, as I start moving the light around in here, you'll see that you're going to start getting an idea of what's happening over here to the colours through the shader. Okay, so you get a kind of really nice indication of exactly what the shader is capable of, even at a very basic level. Okay, so we've had a look at the very basic premise of the Toon Shader. So this is the direct implementation from the code that we downloaded from the website. Now, what we want to do from here on in is we want to take this a stage further, and the way that we're going to do that is by looking at the things that constitute the shader as a concept. Now, those things that comes in two guises. So obviously you have the GLSL file, which is the actual code, and then you have an associated XML, which tells the interface exactly what the code needs to do in terms of the usability of it. Now, as we just looked at that very first shader, there's no real information in the interface. Okay, so there's not really much that the XML is doing. In fact, probably with a shader like this simple, you would probably not even need an XML sidecar, maybe other than to specify what the input is. Now, what we want to do here is we want to move this on a stage further. So if we just close these down, and for the moment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a second version of this that we've looked at. So this is the XML for the Toon Shader version 2. So this is the associated GLSL code. But more importantly, this is the XML. Now, the XML is important in this case because we've started putting in some interface variables, if you like. Now, in this case, what we're looking at is we're just giving it an idea of some very basic things. So a highlight threshold for the color between sort of, I don't know, it doesn't really matter, but in this case we've specified between 0.7 and 1. Okay, what we've also done is we've actually given it a highlight color, so that sort of threshold where the highlight is being defined can also be given a color, and that is all done in here through the XML. So what we do is we specify a name in here. So in this case, it's called thresh0. Now that's what it would appear as in the GLSL file. So if we come to the GLSL file here, you'll see that now at the top here, we're specifying what thresh0 is going to be doing in the XML. Okay, that's then going to specify exactly what we can do with that. So the display name for the implementation of the onboard or on-screen manipulator will be high threshold. It will be in column 0, and it will basically default to 0.8 of the color. It will work between 0.7 and 1, as you can see here, and it will increment on the slider by 0.01. What we'll also have in there is another column. In column 1, there will be a highlight color, and that color type will be specified by the threshold color in the GLSL file, and that will be the RGB111, which will give you white. If we just jump back into here and we go back into batch, and we go back to one view for a second, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to here and I'm going to change shader, and this time we're going to go to Toon Shader V2. And you'll notice that now when I load this up, well, now, as we've just explained, we have a high threshold value here that is at 0.8, which is what we said. It will now jump between 1 and 0.7, which is exactly what we specified. Just reset that. If we look at the output of this, what we'll actually get is just the highlight color. Okay, and you'll see that as I manipulate this, all it's doing is it's taking that threshold that we specified through our XML sidecar. In here, really, all we can do with this now is just change the color of this. So, you know, in some ways, it's not particularly useful, but it does give a very good indication of exactly what is capable with manipulating the XMLs to reflect a code difference in the GLSL file. So taking this premise, we can move it on a stage further. So we've looked at V1, which is the very basic one. We looked at V2, which is the one that we've manipulated the XML sidecar slightly. And in this case, we're looking at V3. And V3 is, again, we've just moved it on a stage further. You can see that we still have the same highlight color as we had in V2, and we still have the same highlight threshold that we'd specified in the XML for V2. But now what we've also got is we want to utilize the matte output on the Matchbox node. Okay, so again, if we split the views here, what we can now see is over here, if I change the color and we make it something like red, and in here we can actually then have an out matte. Okay, so what we should be able to find is as soon as I turn this on now, we'll have a matte that is being associated to the highlight threshold that is being specified from the left here. And again, this is just stuff that we've written into the XML and the associated GLSL of the Toon shader that we got from the internet. And this is what's so nice about this Matchbox premise, is that it does give us this ability to manipulate the fragment shaders on a kind of level that we've never really been able to do before. Again, if we take this one stage further and we actually load up the final one that we created, which is this one here, you'll see that actually this is just that idea again taken to a much higher level. So in here we've now got thresholds for the highs, the midtones, the lows, and we've also got a base threshold, and you can see that these occupy slightly different color spaces in here. We have threshold holdout mattes for each one of those, and we've got colors that can be specified for each of these. So again, in here, if I start turning on different mattes, you'll see how this starts affecting in here. And again, you know, if I start manipulating different parts of those mattes, you'll see exactly how they'll start manifesting themselves and what that will mean. And again, you can see the color in here, but you can also see the way that the base color is going to be affected. And again, what's really nice about this is that any of these colors can be manipulated at any one time. So we can come into here and we can start making these changes, and you'll see that as we go through how this is then going to be affected. If we then start turning different mattes on, affecting different thresholds, you'll see what actually is happening, not only to the shader itself, but to the output of the mask. Now, obviously, that mask means that we can then use that for some very interesting things downstream. Obviously, you now have a front and a matte output, and this is something that is very, very powerful when it comes to working in this context. The other thing to remember here is that if we split the views and we go 3 up, and we make sure that in here we have the action output as well. We just go to this one, make sure this is the context view. What's really nice about this now is that obviously as we start changing the output of this and the light, obviously it's going to still affect the shader and the dynamics on the colors that that's going to work on. And this is a very, very powerful thing to have. And okay, so this is not probably the most complicated shader that some of you could probably write, but it is an indication of the things that you can do with this Matchbox node.